Before we begin, since this is a BBC-owned property, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC has a continuing issue with transphobic leanings in its news coverage. You can find in a pinned comment below various videos from both myself and other YouTubers covering this issue. And while I understand that the Doctor Who creative team is not responsible for this, I will continue to point this out for as long as it remains a consistent issue. Thank you.
Wow. Looks like Chibnall's resolution was to write a better script. Hey folks, Series 11 is behind us, but before I can do a revisit of Series 12, I'm not doing Flux right after that. I need more time and distance from it before I'm prepared to do that. But first, I need to deal with Resolution, the first Doctor Who New Year's special, as opposed to Christmas special. And yeah, as the intro implied, this is one of the better Chris Chibnall scripts. I actually think he's done pretty well with the New Year's specials, which at this point kind of form a little bit of a loose trilogy. But they just feel like they've got a heck of a lot more energy to them. Or rather, it captures that energy that is in the episodes that I like, even though there are other things about those episodes that I don't like. So I've brought up like enjoying the vibe and the energy on more propellant stories like The Ghost Monument or Kerblam. Because I honestly think Chibnall's writing is at its best when it has good momentum. When it's stalled out and it's not really aggressively moving forward and like it's taking its time, setting time aside to explain and like delve into things, it doesn't work. Now, does that mean that it is devoid of problems? No, but I find that the problems that tend to show up in the more propellant and energetic episodes, they tend not to bother me so much because the vibe is working for me. I can be forgiving. There's still stuff that's off about this. And I know there's some people who are more hung up on continuity and specifics, or who find specific moments incredibly egregious or at least memeable and very easy to make fun of. And I'm not going to defend any of those things, but they don't dampen my fun. So where do we start with this? Actually, the cold open. Why don't we start with that? I'd forgotten there was a cold open to this thing. That it starts with this whole ancient battle, ancient foe, split into 3 parts, taken around the world. It's very weird, actually, and ultimately deeply unnecessary. For all intents and purposes, the story would be identical if the Dalek had simply been one Dalek killed and buried somewhere. They were trying to take it to the end of the earth or whatever, just died. That would effectively be the exact same thing. And it would take away a lot of logistical questions because, like, seriously, the descendants of these people just sat next to these burial sites for however long. And with stuff like axes and swords, like, as time has moved forward, they haven't gotten guns, maybe. It's silly and it's deeply unnecessary, and that's about the worst as far as this goes, because like there are these little moments, divergences, like that is really unnecessary, but they're also pretty quick. Because like I feel like in a Chibnall story that isn't working on moving forward and giving a good sense of tension, that a lot more time would have been spent, talking about this ancient order of they even named them. I can't even remember what it is because it doesn't matter. They shouldn't be there at all, but not too much time is spent on them. So as weird as the cold open is, we move on. And I kind of like the idea of the Doctor taking the companions like to all these different versions of New Year's. I kind of find that fun. I also kind of like that the Doctor has like an Earth alert in the TARDIS. It's just like, ooh.
It's just Earth. Leave a little alarm on as it's your home, just in case. Oh, that's bad.
Because it does feel like by this point, The Doctor should have that and probably should have installed it a while ago. So I kind of like that. That works for me. The two archaeologists who are at the dig site and end up uncovering the Dalek, they work pretty well right off at the intro. That's not necessarily great writing. The writing's fine. The performers have good chemistry. They are good both playing off each other in this sort of early stages of a romantic interest thing. But beyond that, they're both very good at projecting a sense of like the wants and needs and what drives these people. So they don't just feel like they're there to fulfill the narrative function of uncovering the Dalek. They feel a little bit more fleshed out than that, largely due to the performances. And that helps as well. Now, okay, we got to talk about the reconnaissance Dalek. I know there are some people out there who don't like the reconnaissance Dalek. They don't like that it tinkers with the lore of what Daleks could be or what they're capable of. Personally speaking, I really don't care about any of that. It gets a unique name, which means it doesn't have to obey the same sort of rules and limitations of other Daleks. It can have other capabilities. Is it ridiculous that it somehow managed to revive and like teleport its other three parts of itself into one place? Yes, that is ridiculous. But it's Doctor Who. That's how we're getting to the story. And the idea that these like were the first to leave Skaro, I could have sworn they actually said this in the episode. I guess they didn't. Maybe it's my headcanon. In my headcanon, like these things are sent off and they work alone and then call in the fleet, largely because they've been genetically altered so much that it's kind of questionable how proper Dalek they are, because the Daleks are very into genetic purity because they're Nazis. So that whole aspect in my head is like, well, that's why they send them off on their own, because they don't actually, the Daleks find the reconnaissance Daleks very useful, but don't actually want them around. So, send them off, do their thing, and then send them off somewhere else. That's my headcanon, at least. But I like the idea that he's puppeting this woman. She does a really good job in performing. You can see the switch when like the Dalek is more in complete control and she gets very menacing in the body language. But then when she's fighting against it, it changes. She actually does really good work in this. I suppose it's worth mentioning at this point the body count or the kills specifically, because there's one in here I've railed against before, and I will bring it up again because it's still real bad. So initially, we've got two cops who get killed because they pull her over for speeding. Then the Dalek kills them. It's not necessary to have it be two. It could have been one, although I don't know. Maybe in England, the cops have to have a ride along, and it's not ever just one cop in a car. So maybe it did have to be two. I honestly don't know. But they die to establish that even outside of its casing, even just in control and attached to this woman, the Dalek is still deadly. Cool. There is a reason to do that. Then we have the somewhat notorious kill where it rocks up to where its pew-pew laser is, and there's a guard there who basically the only thing we learn about him is that he's gay, and then he's dead.
Ooh, no secure digits in Yorkshire. That's what I tell my boyfriend anyway.
It's not great. It's not great. It is a pretty bad example of bury your gays. Now, an accidental one, I'm very confident in that assessment, because this is basically the same thing as what happened to the grandfather back in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Let's establish one thing about this person and then kill them, because in theory, like, it makes them more than one note, except it doesn't. It just gives them that one note as opposed to just being a body to kill. And I don't see why the Dalek couldn't have just figured out a way to bust into it without killing anybody. But, deciding that his one trait we're going to find out about him is gay. Not great. And I think actually it's funny because there's the third guy who gets killed at like this scrapyard where the Dalek ends up rebuilding its casing. he actually kind of makes the case that this, like, giving these characters these one random traits is deeply unnecessary, because this guy doesn't get one. He doesn't get, oh, here's one thing about me. But he still works because we get a sense of who he is just through the job he has, the way he dresses, and the way he talks to her.
Humanity will be destroyed.
All right, enough. Go on. Off me farm.
That's enough. You don't have to establish, oh, by the way, I'm gay. I mean, come on. Anyways, moving on from that. I kind of like the rebuilt Dalek tank. I actually like that the Dalek had to go and recover its I'm just going to start calling it this now, the pew pew laser. Because it would have seemed questionable to me if he could have rebuilt that, because it would have been my assumption that that is powered or uses as ammunition, something that is not to be found on Earth. Whereas you could use metals to approximate the overall tank. So I kind of like that he had to recover that, but then got to build the rest. I kind of dig that. And then we get towards the tail end. I think the way things move forward, the Doctor confronting the Dalek is pretty good. Whittaker does decently, like, with the sense of, I always think I'm rid of them. She gives a good sense of history in her performance when it comes to confronting the Dalek. So that worked pretty well. I think the other major thing that I need to talk about is Ryan's father, which I'm a little mixed on, leaning positive. So if you've seen me go off on the Idiot's Lantern, or talk about, even though it didn't bother me nearly as much, some of the problems with It Takes You Away, much as I love that episode, you know that troubled family figures, fathers in particular, they seem to be something that I keep spotting really bad instances of in Doctor Who in particular. So Ryan's dad at this point has already been established as an absentee father. That was established in Series 11 proper. So I do like that he doesn't just show up out of nowhere and it's like, wait, what's the deal with this guy? The instant we find out that's Ryan's dad, it's like, oh. So the groundwork was laid for this pretty decently. And I actually think that for the most part, this is handled pretty well. I like that Graham just wants him gone. I like that the Doctor, upon finding out who this guy is, her first thing that she says to him is,
You weren't at Grace's funeral.
and it doesn't come across as like she's stating a fact and doesn't realize the sort of social situation. It doesn't come across as a socially awkward thing. It feels legitimately accusatory, and good for her. Because no, he wasn't. And that was pretty messed up. But at the same time, I kind of appreciate that, you know, Graham later on talking to him isn't necessarily forgiving of the guy, but he's like, look, your mother loved you. Here's some of your stuff she kept around. Just don't mess up Ryan again is the reason I don't like you. And the reason I'm not going to just warm to you is because I've seen the damage you do to him. And I also like that Ryan is not naive. The most painful thing that could have happened for me would have been if there was a sense of false hope from Ryan. Instead, I appreciate that he is where he's at, which is that his father has let him down enough times and over a long enough stretch of time. The dude just doesn't get to just stroll back into his life and say, I want to try again.
How you been doing? Seriously? That's where you start?
Yet at the same time, there is a very genuine sincerity from the guy. And that balance is important because, and I need to emphasize this, people can change. But A, they need to want to. They need to want to actually change. Not just reap the rewards of if they were to change, but they have to actually want to be a different person. That's the first thing. And second, it takes time, not just for them to get better, but for the people around them to see that there is consistency and they're sticking to it and to ever be willing to extend an olive branch again. These are important things to have, and this does have them. right up to the very end. And that's where I get very mixed. This doesn't completely wreck it, but I am mixed on this. So the whole thing of the Dalek gets onto Aaron, that's Ryan's dad, gets onto Aaron's back. And the way the doctor, this is an extreme solution. The way the doctor deals with this is they're on the TARDIS, takes them like outside to like where there's a sun and opens up the doors and like creates a little vacuum funnel to try and suck the Dalek off of him. And it's not working. And then Ryan, basically with the power of love, Aaron is able to sort of regain some control of his body and they win. And that's fine as far as, somewhat cheesy resolution goes. Where I get iffy is that Ryan seems to be going into this big expression of love and potentially even forgiveness.
I forgive you.
Forgiveness and a second chance and the faith of people you love is energizing. So as cheesy as it is, I actually kind of buy that would have given Aaron sort of the ability to stand his ground. I do buy that because that is powerful. But at the same time, even though it's under fantastical circumstances, I just don't think it's a good idea to frame forgiveness and second chances around a big moment. Like I said, it's something that has to happen with time, and that's something that Ryan recognizes earlier. But because this is only an hour and it needs to wrap up in a satisfying and heartwarming way, we're going to end on a big moment and imply, well, things will be good from here forward. That's not how it works. Anyone who relies on big moments, be they the person who is seeking a second chance or be they the person who is prepared to extend a second chance, doing it in big moments is in a way like removes the focus on just do better over time, because it creates a situation where, okay, well, if I just do a big enough thing, if it's a big enough moment, then I'll be forgiven again. And it can honestly just lead to backsliding again. It can lead to a cycle as opposed to just slow and steady progression forward. Again, I get why it's there for the sake of narrative catharsis. And this is far from the worst offender as far as depictions of toxic family members go. But I also don't love it. But it is really just that moment at the end. And it doesn't completely kill it. And on rewatch, like to my memory, the stuff with Ryan and his dad didn't really work. But watching it now, I'm like, no, except for that bit at the end that I'm a little iffy on. For the most part, this actually works quite well. I was kind of surprised, pleasantly so, to notice that. There's a couple of other little things here and there, both good and bad. I like that Yaz is basically still on people wrangling duty pretty consistently, which fits with her position as a police officer. So that works. There's a mention on Ryan's dyspraxia again, which feels like it comes out of nowhere because they realized they hadn't brought it up in a while. Okay. And like it doesn't even factor in. It's just he goes, not bad for a guy with dyspraxia, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I guess not. That's a weird way to put it. And there's also the somewhat notorious, but the internet's down, what do? Guess we'll have to have a conversation joke, which it's not a good joke, but I don't care. Like, whatever. My only issue with it is the setup drags on a little too long. Like, you could have just, it could have been half as long as it is, that scene. Would it make the joke better? No, not really, but it would just eat up less time. And as a joke, it's like, it's dumb, but whatever. People got real upset about that joke. I don't actually get why. I guess they feel it's just emblematic of some of Chibnall's writing, but it's like, it's just a toss away joke that doesn't really work. So what? But for the most part, I really do like Resolution. And for Chibnall especially, because he is the credited writer on this, it's a significant step up. Especially after Battle of Renskora of Kolos. Gah. But, resolution, what do you think about it? Have you rewatched it lately? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, and subscribe. Patreon, that's what pays the bills. And any amount you're able to give is of great assistance. But there are other ways to support me. There are channel memberships. I have merchandise and books and other things, or things like Twitch and TikTok where you can follow me as well. But don't worry too much about it. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. All right. I've got thanks to give for my Patreon supporters. Robin Moore, Zubin Fala, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Linda Walters, Emu Delki, The Oath of Boyd, TT, Fernobulax the Poodle, Zach, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Toku BL Huvian, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. The Rats and I thank you.